welcome back to another Fabulous channel. I'm Jacob for and today we're going to be talking about, let's talk about that scene, I think it's what I call this series, and that is where we analyze a particular scene from a book. It can be from any part of the book, and it's from me afterwards, and there's a few different dissections we do throughout. We'll read the scene together so that everybody is on the same page and context while we talk about it. And then I'll talk about the writing, I'll talk about what I liked about it, what it did for me as a reader. And when I first read it, we'll go back to those first moments of me reading it. I don't vlog that experience, but we'll just talk about it in passing. And then we'll also talk about what it does for the story and if the scene is important. A few of these videos that I planned out for the next few months, they're actually talking about certain scenes that I didn't think are necessary, but were well written. I can understand why the editor or the author decided to keep it. This is one of those scenes for me personally I'm excited to talk about. We are talking about Manhunt by Gretchen Faulkner Martin is the author here. They have several other works that I'm really excited to pick up. This is a new release that came out in March. I decided to choose a very early on scene. This is the second scene of the book from chapter 1. There's a lot of scenes to talk about for this book, for sure, and I'm curious to see which scene you guys would decide if you guys have read it down below as well. I don't think a lot of people picked this up yet, and so hopefully maybe this will get more ground. I do want to mention this book is extremely graphic. The scene I'm about to read to you is extremely graphic, like graphic violence, and it's described in such an interesting way. I wanted you to know that before we jump into it. It's a short scene, it's only like 4 or 5 paragraphs long, but that's how most of the book scenes are. They're very, very short. Let's go ahead and jump into it. I just want to let you guys know that there is a content warning. There also could be a slight spoiler warning, but anything that has to do with spoilers, the screen will turn this color while we talk about them. Okay. We're also going to throw up the scene that I'm reading to you guys over here as we read along. So if you want to read along with me, you can. Let's jump into it. Some context to where we're at. The first scene is Fran and Beth. We meet them all there on a hill, and they end up shooting a man with an arrow. This is the aftermath. Fran come open, a V incision to either side of his spine and sliced his adrenal glands off the tops of his kidneys. Then she fished his balls out of his rashy scrotum. When she cut open his ballsack, excluded a stink like a bath bomb infused with rancid pork. Yeah, okay. She packed his giblets into her duffel between layers of dry ice wrapped in yellowing newspaper. She tried not to look at the other things rolling inside him, at the squirming tumors that flinched from her hunting knife and scalpel, hiding among the bones and fleshy membranes like goldfish in the archways and battlements of an aquarium castle. Birds gathered in the branches overhead as she worked. Cows mostly, the wide-winged shadows of turkey vultures sweeping in long, lazy circuits over the forest floor. A red-tailed hawk kept silent, watched over the basin and its little surgical table-legs. Beth stood guard nearby, an arrow knocked, her own knife loose in her sheath at her hip. When Fran was done, she washed her hands in the pool and dried them on the front of her blood-stained, moth-eaten tank. The dead man stared at her accusingly with one bloodshot golden eye, his face still twisted in a vicious snarl. "You good?" Beth asked. The shadows were getting longer. The birds would draw attention, no more laughter. Fran shouldered the rucksack and stood, knees popping. After 45 minutes spent squatting over the dead man's gaping back, she looked away from his baleful, unseeing gaze, feeling suddenly absurdly guilty. Yeah, let's boogie. They scaled the slope in silence, Beth in the lead and Fran following close behind, neither of them looking back as the watchful croaking of Ukrainian birds became a ravenous oh my gosh, you just know a word but you can't say it. Cacophony? I said it wrong. Black wings flogging the hot summer air. Okay, that's the scene we're going to talk about. Before we jump into it under analytically, talking about the structure of it, the different things it did, and if the scene worked or anything like that, some of my favorite lines, whole 9 yards, words, words. Let's talk about my initial reaction when I read this scene. Why did this one stand out to me? There's one other scene in the book that takes place about halfway through that I had about the same exact reaction. I was reading it and I was like, okay. Like so far, like it was a very fast opening and I was like, okay, where could this be going? I had no idea what this book was about. I think that's very important for reference. I still don't even know what the actual description gives away, so I couldn't even tell you if this fits it or not. But when it said, then she fished his balls out of his rashy scrotum, I literally gasped out loud. I was working. I was listening to the audiobook, having a good time. I gasped. I said, what the fuck? And then I continued to do my work. It took me back, and I had to sit there, and I had to go backwards, and I had to read it. So it was very shocking to me. I wasn't expecting something like this to just, like, pop out, I should say. So yeah, it caught me off guard. I figured it was it's an interesting scene, as there's a lot of these spaced throughout. Almost like, the wording is a little bit different, but there's a lot of things that are very similar to it. And so to me personally, I feel like this is a very similar scene to a lot of different ones. There's a lot of dissection scenes, I should say, throughout the book. Now let's talk about the wordings. The way the scene is written. Do I like it? Does it flow for me correctly? Do I think it moves nicely? Do I think there needs to be anything added? Personally, this is a book, and so it's not just like we're talking about like one individual scene and taking it out of context. I mean, we are, but like there is more scenes past this one. This is not even the last scene of chapter 1, and things like that. I just think it's very strongly opened. I think using words like fish, rashy, bath bomb infused, roasted pork, giblets. I think it both, in my opinion, in a way, makes it horrifying but also funny. Like, I remember laughing while also being disturbed, which is so refreshing. And then you have moments, so you have that, and you have juxtaposed to the paragraph afterwards, which is birds gathering the branches overhead as she worked, crows mostly in the wide-winged shadow of turkey vultures sleeping in long lazy circuits over the forest floor. A red-trailed hawk kept silent watch over the basket in its little surgical table tucks. Like, I just think it's so beautifully written. And so you have both things, and they're put again back and forth between juxtaposition. And so I think the metaphors, the wording, and things like that are so beautiful here that it's both funny, but it's also endearing. And I think it has a nice sense of foreboding to it with a touch of like whimsical, magical, which all go against one another. And I think it's handled really well. You know, there's a lot of lines here that are supposed to be very shocking. I think the way she describes it does it in a very elegantly shocking way, which is nice. I like it. Now, what does this scene do for the reader? One, introduce you to the fact that, oh my god, this is happening. Two, it brings up a few questions. Why are they doing this? They briefly describe what the virus does, but they don't really describe why they need to do these things. It opens up a few different questions of why they decided to do this. Why is the book opening this way? The virus itself is not explained to you. You get little hints and things, such as in the first paragraph of the scene, the squirming tumors that flinch from her hunting knife and scalpel, hiding among bones and fleshy membranes like goldfish in the archways and battlements of an aquarium castle. Beautifully written. Oh my god. So I think it does work in a way. It sets up the mood, the tone, but it also brings up a lot of questions. And so, because this is such an early on scene, if this would happen randomly and there's no context and it comes out of the blue, then I think we would be having a different conversation here. But because, one, I know what's coming forward, and we're going to talk about that next, I do think the scene works. Now, let's talk about the final analysis, and that is, how does it directly affect with the overall story? Well, if you guys don't know, the overall story is, like I said, about this virus. They need these specifically to fight off this virus, which is where I would say maybe the slight spoiler would come into. I think it's made really clear in like the next like 2 or 3 scenes, so I'm not going to declare it a spoiler here as it's so early on in the book. I think it's important. I wanted to talk about this scene specifically just because I was so shocked about it. There's this one, and then there's one other one. I don't know the words to, so that they're frying the balls to eat them, and I figured that one was really shocking as well. There's a lot of bigger overturned context here as well, you know, with the dealings of trans communities and stuff inside this novel. Like, there's a lot more insightful things we could have talked about, but I just wanted one of the more, like, nitty-gritty shocking ones, and I think this did the trick for me personally. Let me know, guys, how you thought about this video, if you guys liked it, if you guys didn't like it. We'll have a few more of these videos coming up in the future. If there's any books that you know of that have really shocking scenes, or scenes that you think need to be analyzed a little bit on a deeper level that are not just like this, and they can be about any type of ones. Scenes that made you laugh, scenes that made you cry, funny ones, heartfelt ones, twistful ones, whatever it might be, let me know in the comments down below, as I would love to talk about them with you, as long as I've read the book, or I could read the book for the video. Also possible. Alright, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you all next time for another beautiful video. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.